Hey everybody, I'm Alexis. This is my husband Garrett, and today we're continuing our series on how the types can be annoying. So I want to just give a caveat about this series. It's not just trying to like roast the types and just, oh, they're so annoying or whatever, but it's mostly just a provocative title, kind of a tongue-in-cheek title, and a format from which we can say how the types can grow. And some of these traits that we name, it's not that all INFPs exhibit all of these traits, and these traits are exclusive to INFPs. No other types do any of these things. So it's more of like a nuance. It's like there's a spectrum of healthy to unhealthy, and I notice more of these traits in unhealthy INFPs. I don't notice these traits in all INFPs. So yeah, I do notice it more often in unhealthy ones, but it's not that all INFPs do these, and I certainly notice some of these behaviors in unhealthy other types as well. So I want to start off by talking about what I love about INFPs. So I've said before in other videos, INFPs are my favorite type. Stands true. It's true. I love INFPs. I love the it's this like dark, brooding, emotional, like poet. I just think it's so interesting. It's this very just interesting landscape that seems like in their heads, and we talk about some really interesting things. I don't know. I can just get like into the meat with like INFPs. I don't know. It's just phenomenal, interesting conversations, and then they can get into that NE side, and then they'll show me something new, and then the conversation maybe we'll talk about something new, and then there's like this intricate emotional landscape of like specifically how they feel about these different convictions and stuff. So I love INFPs. Favorite type.
Yeah, I messed with her. I tell her she's the INFP whisperer because it seems like you just draw the INFPs.
They do. They like flock to me. It's true. It happens. I don't have a problem with it. It's great.
I love INFPs. I like. I've talked in the ISFP video. I don't really like ISFPs as much, which is my own type. But I like INFPs like authenticity. I think because it's slightly different than. Authenticity is a personality hacker term. FI, they're introverted feeling. I think they're I don't know. There's like the NE is sort of a cool weirdness that I like about them, and they're not afraid to be themselves. It's like this NE is like sort of culture. What is it called? Like contrasting culture, like
Iconoclast.
Yeah, sure, iconoclast. Yeah, they're like this hippie vibe. I think is which I really like and resonate with, and so I love that about them.
Yeah.
Common mistypes. So a lot of times if you've just taken a test, you can often test one letter off in the Myers-Briggs community. So if we're going through this and some of these stuff doesn't resonate with you, check out some of the like one letter off of INFPs like ENFP, ISFP, INTP, or INFJ.
Yeah, I think in the case of this type, INFP is probably the most common mistype. And when you get the JP letter wrong, it changes all of the cognitive functions. So if we go through this and some of it doesn't resonate, that JP difference is very important. And in this case, INFPs actually lead with a J function, and INFJs lead with a P function. So it's kind of confusing nomenclature, but if you're just really attached to like, I am a perceiver or whatever, it doesn't necessarily mean that INFJs are dominant perceivers. So it's confusing nomenclature for the introverts. I wish it wasn't that way, but
yeah,
alas, that's how it is. So let's get into the cognitive functions for the INFP. We'll have them on the whiteboard on the screen. So their first cognitive function is introverted feeling. So the word introvert means to turn inward. Intro, inward, vert, to turn. So to turn inward to their feelings. So this could be feelings, this could be emotions, this could be convictions, morals, ethics. It's just how do things strike you and how do you feel about things? And a lot of times it's having a lot of nuance to how they feel about things, a lot of nuance to their convictions and how things should be done. Their second cognitive function is extroverted intuition. So it's turning outward, so to kind of the external world. And intuition is the opposite of sensing. So sensing are the things you've experienced. And so intuition is the opposite of that. So it's kind of things that you haven't experienced. So a lot of times it's taking an idea, something you've never experienced this before, but you have this new idea and you're bringing it to life externally. So this can lead to creativity and inventiveness and seeing a lot of different possibilities. It can lead INFPs to be kind of on the cutting edge of new. A lot of times it's art forms I've noticed, but not limited to art forms, but on the cutting edge of those things. Their third cognitive function is introverted sensing, so it's turning inward, and then sensing are the things you've experienced with your five senses. So it's an internal processing of your sensory experiences. So that's pretty much processing memories or stories. It can be kind of detail oriented, like the devil's in the details. It can be about tradition, like if this function's high up in people's stacks, it means they love going inward and processing their experiences. And so it can be kind of optimistic toward the past if you really enjoy going inward and processing the past, for example. But it's not, it's not that just SIs the only types that ever think about the past or anything like that. But it's just a love for the internal processing of it. And their fourth function is extroverted thinking. So it's turning outward toward the thinking criteria, the logical criteria. So when you think about external logic, that's pretty much logistics, managing people and things. External logical metrics are like money is an external logical metric, time management. So being productive, getting things done, making a lot of money. And I think some of those things can be kind of repulsive to INFPs because it's their fourth function. So if you're an INFP, you might actually not super resonate with that because people's fourth function tends to be kind of turned off sometimes. But that's what it's about anyways. So we're going to get into what we find annoying, kind of tongue-in-cheek, basically just growth advice. So what do you think about their first function, growth advice?
All right. First function, I put FI, and I share this, but like depressive. So I've noticed a lot of INFPs we know can be very depressive, and I think it's a combo of if they're in an introverted loop, so they're not experiencing the world a lot, they can get into their other introverted function with this SI, or introverted sensing, which can be oftentimes non-optimistic about the future. So if you're not optimistic about the future and you have a lot of feelings that you're constantly dwelling on the future is bad and all of this, it can lead to this like depression and lethargicness.
Yeah, and I think sometimes I'll say things like that, the introverted feeling is depressive, and I get people in the comments that are like, depression is not only FI. And I agree, like none of these traits are exclusive to any of these things. I think the reason that FI can lend itself to depression is it's an internal processing of your feelings, and it's first, so you love doing that. And what makes it different from other types, it's almost a love for depression. It's like, oh, I love being in this sad emotion. It's kind of different. It's like everyone can be depressed, but with INFPs, it's like getting into the nuance of the feelings. Is it despair? Is it despondent? Is it hopeless?
It's like they can get off on how sad they are.
Yes, yes. So yeah, it's not that depression's exclusive to INFPs, but introverted feeling dominant. And I find for INFPs more so than even ISFPs. So I think it is that combination with SI that part of depression can be a hopelessness for the future. And I do think that when introverted sensing is not developed very well, if it's not nuanced, it's past good, future bad, and that can be very depressing if the future is not hopeful. Yeah, that was the first thing that I wrote down as well. And I kind of, I have some of that FI as well. I can enjoy some of this, let's be depressed together.
Yeah, it's sort of what you like about INFPs in a way. You're like, man, they're so depressive and moody, and I like it. I get more bugged by it.
Yeah, I think it's because your FI is more, you have an FI first, so you're more like nuanced with it. Where I've got that bratty third FI, like, oh yeah, we're in our emo phase for life. Yeah. Yeah, I think there can be this playing the victim. I think that TE is pretty good about taking responsibility for itself, especially in like a career setting, if TE is oriented on this external metrics. Now, if you have it fourth, you're not super interested in it. So it can lead to FIs like, you hurt me. And it's all about how other people hurt you and your feelings, but sometimes it's not about maybe how you contributed to that situation or anything. So like an example was we knew this INFP, and she said she was half an hour late to work, and she was kind of complaining to us. She's like, and they docked me. They didn't pay me for that half hour. Can you believe that? Like, how petty that they wouldn't pay me for that half hour. And it's like this not taking responsibility and kind of not understanding how TE works. It's like not understanding pay structures in the workplace, and then if you're half an hour late, I think I'm a TE second. I think that's completely like, yeah, of course, that's well within their grounds to not pay you for half hour of working.
Yeah, we talked about in the ENFP video, your extroverted, partner or whatever. Counterpart, there you go. Oftentimes are late or can procrastinate things. I've noticed the same patterns in INFPs too, that they can often show up late to things, often show up, unprepared and unready for things because because of that low TE and low SI, they're not developing those functions that would normally make you on time, responsible, dutiful, I guess.
Yeah. I think one thing that we mentioned in the ESTP video, we noticed that INFPs and ESTPs butt heads a lot. Sometimes because they've got each other's like bottom functions and it's like they don't see eye to eye. And I've noticed that in the area that I live, a lot of people that are super into like Donald Trump, for example, are ESTPs. And a lot of people that are super against Donald Trump are INFPs that I personally happen to know. Not that all or always or anything like that, but just the ones I know a lot of times are. And I think one thing that can irritate people about INFPs is I hear from the conservative side a lot irritation about like identity politics or living off the social system. What do you call it? Like welfare checks or whatever. And I actually noticed some INFPs doing those things. I actually know an INFP that's his whole thing that he has a summer job and then he gets unemployment like all winter long. So he doesn't really have to work. And I think that's some of what bothers ESTPs about INFPs is kind of this lack of work ethic, just thinking that like the government needs to meet all of their needs and they're not going to put any work in and unnecessarily playing the victim. Like I think there are instances where you like legitimately are the victim, but I think being a victim and playing the victim there's a nuance. It's different, you know what I'm trying to communicate that, like, yeah, bad things have happened to you, and then there's a difference between something bad has happened to you and you process it, maybe you speak out about injustices, and then there's a difference between, like, milking it, and then almost becoming a villain yourself, claiming to be a victim.
Yeah, all of these functions we're seeking balance. So unhealthiest INFPs are going to be so trapped in their FISI that their introverted functions and what makes them unhealthy is they're not balanced with their TE and their NE. So in the case of FI, unhealthy FI shows up like, not all hippies are like this, but the hippie stereotype is sort of this nomad who doesn't ever do work and is sort of just musing about life and very dreamy, but they're not, I think a really healthy, I've talked about like the purest form of each function is found at its balance with the other side of it. So the best form of FI, I think, is found when you've developed TE so that you're not just this dreamer, but you're also this doer. I think TE DOMs are phenomenal at getting things done, showing up in the world, creating systems, following systems really well, and they're anything but lazy. And I think FI, in an unhealthy way, when it's not developed TE, can be lazy and can be not personally responsible.
Yeah, and I think that's something that Garrett is particularly passionate about because he's an ISFP, he's an FI Dom, and so he's really worked on TE, and so he's seen a lot of benefit from adding some TE to his life. So that's something that he's particularly probably going to come off passionate about in this video. Yeah. One thing with is this interest in social causes, social injustices, and it's a lot of talk about social injustices, but then there's no action. And I get a little tired of sometimes hearing about another injustice and another injustice and another injustice, but it's just all talk. It's one thing to you educate yourself and you learn about something, but then there comes a point where you're kind of like, I don't know what all the talking is doing. Like, if it's so bad, maybe do something about it. And then I'd be much more inclined to want to be listening to it,
Yeah, like I respect an INFP who's actually like in the Peace Corps and on the field somewhere than an INFP who's posting about it on Facebook, for example.
Yeah.
That's a lot different.
Or something like talking about like plastic straws and like saving the turtles and things like that, and then at the same time just drinking out of a lot of straws. It like the hypocritical, like the difference between the talk and the action.
Yeah, words are cheap. Sort of the idea. Yeah. The last thing I had for FI, care about self. I put this for ISFP also, but can care about self over other people. So FI, again, when it's unhealthy, can be so focused on its own feelings and the own intricacies of self that it's like loses sight of other people and what other people are going through, how other people are doing in the room. I think, healthy TE and healthy NE are more aware of other people and they're interacting with other people. They care about how other people are doing. Whereas FI unhealthy doesn't.
Yeah, my last point was kind of the same thing. I wrote down self-absorbed. Kind of even get this. It's so much like I think that's like one of the Enneagram 4 vices can be kind of this self-absorption. And there's a big correlation between those two types. And sometimes I've had the experience where I go over to an INFP's house and you just hear about the current thing they're sad about the whole time. Maybe I'm over at their house for 3 hours and the whole time they're talking about this thing that they're really sad about. And they never asked how I was doing or anything. Or I mean, there's a specific example. When I was going through my whole breast lump thing, it was one of the hardest things I probably ever went through. And I go over to this INFP's house and she's just going on and on about this other thing that was really small in comparison, I felt. And I kind of like told her about it and we just on in like 30 seconds. We talked about like something was going on with me for like 30 seconds and then for the rest of like the 3 hours going on about this like I think it was like a skate park injustice thing that was happening. Okay, NE. What do you have for NE?
I put and this sort of relates. Some of these will relate to multiple things, but a lot of dreams that they never do. So I think again, this is FI and NE both. I think can dream really big. I think especially with NE, they see the potential in life, the potential in so many things, that they have massive dreams for what they want to do with their life, what they want to do in the world, how they want to show up. But they haven't developed a healthy SI or a healthy NE that's actually doing it. So I think, again, these are all balanced, but a healthy SI is going to put up routines and put up structures that are getting them to the dreams that they want to. I mean, it also relates to a TE also on the other side, but healthy TE is getting things done, making sure that you're fulfilling the dreams that you've set out for yourself. So I've noticed INFPs who sort of that talk the talk, but especially with, you hear a lot about their dreams because they have awesome dreams. They have wonderful ideas about how life should be lived, but they oftentimes don't live up to it if they're not balanced.
Yeah, that was my second point as well, was there can be kind of this oscillating between NE and SI. It's like they'll have a spurt of NE. Okay, I'm writing the book, I'm doing this thing. And then over time, maybe they're not seeing results very quickly. And I think it comes down to FI, just maybe being kind of impatient. Like, don't people see the work that I'm doing? Or maybe they feel bad about themselves, like, oh, I'm starting to feel sad because the results aren't coming in or whatever. Kind of TE is whispering, oh, there haven't been metrics there. The results are not coming in. The money's not coming in or things like that. And then they get down into that SI and it's like, oh, well, I guess I better go back to school because I had a friend who went to school to be a nurse. And so I've seen that before and it seemed like it worked out. So I'm going to do that thing. And then over time, FI kicks in again and they're like, we don't like this. This is feeling meaningless. So then back to NE and we'll do a spurt of doing something creative, maybe quit that previous job, quit that previous schooling, and we're back to this. And so this is oscillating between NE and SI, specifically in that creative career sense I've found.
Yeah, we touched on ENFPs developing SI is sticking to things long term. So I've noticed a lot of ENFPs sort of unhappy. Eventually, over time, they've tried a lot of things. They have a lot of, similar to INFPs, a lot of dreams about what they want to do. So they're trying a bunch of stuff. They're sort of exploring a lot of options, but they're never happy with it because they haven't stayed with something long term. So for INFPs, I think they might not swap around as much, but they're not sticking to the one thing they're really passionate about. So, for example, really passionate about like writing. Like I think a lot of INFPs are great writers, phenomenal writers. But they're passionate about writing books or songs or poetry, whatever it is. But they're exploring all these other things, sort of an unhealthy NE distraction though. Whereas maybe there's a healthy NE that's balanced with SI and you're writing, but maybe you're writing different styles of genre, but you're at least getting the thing that you want to do done. You're staying within writing, whereas I know INFPs who sort of swap to, maybe they're writing, but then they're like, this is too hard, so now I'm going to, do schooling for something completely different, or I'm going to do a labor job now, or I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, but they're avoiding what they really want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that can be really sad when I see them. It seems like they have their one thing. So FI knows, this is the one thing I want to do. I want to be a writer. I want to be a musician. It seems like in my experience with them, it seems like they're pretty sure of what they want to do. It's just a matter of, will they allow themselves to stick with it long term? And I think it's kind of this like, you dig a little bit in this hole. You're trying to, like the metaphor is you're digging a well. So you dig a little bit in the musician hole, and then it's not working. You haven't hit water. So you're going to go over here and try the nursing hole, and you do that, but you don't get to water. So then you go back here, and it's hard to get traction. It's like every time you come back, it's kind of like starting over. Maybe you've like slightly built on it, but it's kind of like, almost like starting over a completely new hole.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say sometimes I can notice them having issues with drugs, or it could be fast food, or it's like, it's an NESI issue. It's like maybe the drugs are like, oh, I'll do ecstasy or something, and I'll have this new experience, kind of NE, but then it becomes a bad SI kind of routine and this habit, and so it's kind of this implementation of bad exploratory habits.
Yeah. Or I know INFPs who, can get stuck in video games, like this bad SI habit of, sort of not really living your life. So if you're unhappy with not fulfilling your dreams, you're going to start looking for these bad SI routines to make you, forget about that.
Yeah, it's just numbing out, kind of.
Yeah.
Through different means.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's all I had for NE.
I put, maybe as I say it, I don't remember what I was trying to say. Hide, escape from relationships. For NE. I think what I'm trying to mean. I think what I was saying. So I think SI in a healthy way is really good at loyal friendships, long-term stable. Like you think of SI DOMs, they've had like probably the same best friend for like 20 years or something. A lot of times they've developed really long-term relationships, and I think INFPs can sometimes, not as much as ENFPs, but can hop through relationships, sort of explore different unhealthy relationships. A lot of times I'm trying to think. So they don't stick with relationships long enough to find meaningful ones, I guess.
Yeah. I can see, yeah, it's like they'll hop into a relationship, and then it seems like something strikes them, maybe something immoral about their partner. Maybe they felt like their partner wasn't giving them enough attention. Maybe their partner wasn't meeting their emotional needs as much. I think those are some common complaints with INFPs. And then they're just gone. And then what happens is then SI kicks in again and is like, oh, we really missed that person. And then I can get the sense of they're kind of stuck in this SI. And then they kind of idealize that old partner, even though there were issues, but then they start idealizing that old partner. And then they'll switch to villainizing the old partner. And then we're back to idealizing. And it can be kind of this oscillation with the past. The past was great, the past was terrible, and it's an unstable view of the past sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was actually my next point for SI, is just this either romanticizing the past and being stuck in it, or kind of this hating the past. That relationship is all bad.
Yeah. Yeah, developed SI is, I think, a lot more nuanced. So, we talk about SI and sometimes in terms like the past is bad, and it's because this unhealthy, unnuanced SI is like, the past is good. The past is good. The future is bad. There's nothing good coming up in the future. And I think a nuanced SI is like, no, there's actually a lot of things that I've experienced in my life in the past. A lot of things that the human existence has experienced in life, and there's a lot of good, a lot of bad, and so the future's going to be good and bad. There's going to be a lot of options for how the future could go, but it's not just a black and white, bad or good future.
Yeah, I can see this kind of like when they're young, there's like this FINE kind of idealism about what their career could be. And they see all these positive possibilities about how that could be. And then as they set out on that career, they experience some challenges, and maybe the TE is not developed enough to really get themselves out there or something like that. And then they kind of switch and turn to this SI that's like, oh, people are stupid for thinking that they could make it in music. It's not going to happen. And then they get really, it's almost harsh. It's almost kind of spiteful. And you can tell it's almost this bitterness that they have toward not being able to make it in that thing, which always just like breaks my heart. And I just am always like, if you could just do it for longer than 3-month spurts at a time, I think they'd be so successful. It's like not a matter of, are these people untalented? Like, when I meet these INFPs, I'm not like, oh, they're untalented and that's why they're not making it. In my experience, the reason that they're not making it is because they haven't done it consistently for long enough, and they haven't gotten their name out there. So it's like they make this really cool music, or they write this really cool stuff, but then they never show it to anyone. They never get their name out there. Sometimes FI can be averse to, like, I don't want to advertise myself. That's fake. It needs to be this grassroots thing that just goes from the ground up. But
Yeah.
it hasn't really worked in my experience with the INFP.
Yeah, and I think you've touched on it. It's sort of like a TE point, but I think you've made, like, before, embrace the suck is sort of the, like, you have to go through a lot of just crap to get to where you want to be. I think SI might understand the process a bit more of you have to stick with something over the long term. Maybe it might take 10 years, but if you stick with something long enough, eventually you get to where you want to. Any can have a hard time staying with something that long term. But TE and SI developed are going to embrace that hard process of sticking with something long term, doing the actions that it takes, showing up in the world. In the terms of writing, write a bunch of crap. In the terms of music, play a bunch of crap, but at least release out into the world, start getting it done, and you improve. That's how you improve. You don't improve by thinking about writing music or thinking about writing poetry or plays or whatever your passion is as an INFP. Thinking about it isn't going to get you anywhere. It's doing it that improves your skills and actually gets you out there.
Yeah, and I think one pattern that we've noticed with the types is that their dominant function will have a goal. So then they'll develop a behavior that they think will meet that goal, but it's actually self-defeating and it gets you the opposite. So in the case of the INFP, similar with the ISFP, the thing with the INFP is they say, okay, I'm only going to do the thing that I love and the thing that I'm passionate about and the thing that moves me emotionally. And like career-wise, that's all I'm going to do. I'm only going to do that thing. I'm not going to do anything else. But then maybe they don't have the work ethic, or maybe they get into these self-defeating kind of addictions, or maybe there's a little bit of laziness or something like that. And they think that they're like, okay, I'm not going to do anything else besides what I like and what I feel like doing. And then what that leads to is them maybe not putting out as much music as they need to. And so then because they're not making money, they eventually have to do something else. So then they get this temporary job that they don't like that much, but they think, okay, it'll get them there. But so they're not putting in enough work ethic, they're not putting in enough hard work that they don't actually get the thing they want. They just have this carrot on a stick that someday you'll have this dream job, but in reality what it turns into is a string of all these jobs that they hate. Because it's like you can either have a bunch of jobs you don't like for the rest of your life and you never do the writing thing. That's option one. Or you do the hard work of the writing. Maybe you don't like it at first. There are some hard days where you don't feel like doing it. You do some advertising that feels slimy and inauthentic, but then you actually get to the point where you want to be. So it's, do you want bad forever, or do you want bad at first and good later?
Yeah, and you have a video on, I think, side hustling. I don't know what it's called or something, but the idea, I think TE DOMs, like a healthy TE, understands the necessity of sort of a side hustle. In our culture, we would call it, but working on something that maybe you don't like working a job that at least consistently pays the bills, you're getting your money from it. But especially, I think a lot of INFPs and ISFPs have these dreams that are impractical, for a better word. They're like musical or they're artistic, and a lot of times it takes some time for that to actually pay money, pay the bills. And so the necessity becomes finding a job that you can do for a while you side hustle and do this thing consistently until that starts to pay off. I think I've noticed this in myself, but FI DOMs can idealize, okay, I'm gonna quit my jobs, I'm gonna work on this for a month, and that is gonna get me success, and then I will be able to just do whatever it is full time for the rest of my life. But it takes a long time sometimes, and so being willing to work something you don't like while doing something you love at the same time for a long time until what you love becomes what you can do full time.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. I feel like we talked about a lot more than what's written on the screen, but I don't even know what to write, so we're just gonna move on. It's T. This is what I was gonna talk about. Just maybe there can be some laziness or non-responsibility. This may not have gone in this box. It could have been, a non-nuanced SI, for example, that could lead to this. But yes, it's kind of this like, I'll just quit my job, and then they become kind of lazy, and then they're like, okay, so I have to go back to doing the job I don't like. And after a while, okay, I'm going to go back to the passion. Okay, then I have to go back to the job I don't like. And it's like, do both at the same time, and then it works a lot better.
Yeah. This is sort of back to SI a little bit, but I put a fixation. So you touched on it a little bit, but I think they can get sort of fixated on things in a way where they're losing sight of, if you're stuck in these introverted functions of FI and SI, you get so fixated on an unhealthy SI, on details that ultimately aren't important. Like any is big picture, SI can be small picture, in unnuanced forms. And so I've noticed sometimes with INFPs fixation on, you can see like conspiracy theories, I think sometimes with INFPs, anti-government sort of like, they're after me, I'm sure they're after me, and sort of this fixation on things that aren't really impacting your life. But
yeah, I noticed NE and SI, second and third, can be story building. So it shows up different in other types. So for some, it's this elaborate story about the government. For some, it's this elaborate story about how your friends are gossiping about you or whatever. But in the case of the INFP, I can notice some. Because it's very imaginative. NE is very imaginative. This is what could be happening. And then SI has, okay, here's the details of the story and stringing it together. And so,
yeah,
I can notice some of that.
Yeah. I've already touched on basically all the TE stuff. I've said a lot about TE.
Yeah, me too. I think along the way we kind of have. There was something I was going to say and I just cannot remember what it was, but
it was probably going to be the most insightful thing in this video.
Yeah, it was going to be so good and gone.
It's going to change your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think for INFPs and for all the types, it's just the encouragement is to work on your second and fourth function. I think what types do is they say, my first function and my first function only will get me what my first function wants. And it's it's doubling down on that first function. But actually what I've found is that letting go of the first function, getting into that fourth function is actually what gets you ultimately in the most effective way what your first function wants. What does your first function want? In the sense of INFPs, I think a lot of times it's they want a career that they feel passionate about and expresses their ideas creatively. Now, a lot of that, some of that's TE. You want to make money in a career from this thing. You want the logistics to be taken care of. You don't want to have to be worried about money. You want to be able to just, live your life doing what you're passionate about. And it pretty much is impossible to do the creative thing you're passionate about without some logistics. And, here's the thing I was going to say. I remembered it. In the book, The Artist's Way, or not The Artist's Way, The War of Art. You should read The War of Art. INFPs should read The War of Art. And there's a part, it's probably written by an INFP, I would say. It's a very interesting book. And he was talking about, people were asking him, like, so when you want to sit down to write a book, 'cause he's an author, like when you want to sit down to write, do you have a schedule or do you wait for the inspiration to strike you? That can be an INFP tendency, I think, just waiting for the inspiration to strike. Mm-hmm. And he's like, yes, I wait for the inspiration to strike. Fortunately for me, it always strikes every morning at 7 a.m. sharp.
Yeah, because he wakes up, he gets to his desk at 7 a.m. every morning,
Yeah, and I think this is what people, I can get into this mode sometimes where it's like, when I'm inspired, that's when the art's going to be the best. And that's not actually the case. Some of my best stuff, some of my most well-received things came from times that I was feeling actually kind of burnt out and lethargic, but I was just committed and I wanted to keep up the momentum. And then it was perceived really well. Mm-hmm. And it's just a matter of being real to the burnout. It's like, don't quit when you're burnt out, but still create and let that lethargy kind of come out in whatever you create. I don't know that I'm explaining that super well, but it's still be real, but you want to build the momentum. There's an inertia, and it builds and builds and builds, and it's kind of exponential. And for the first part, it's flat, and then it kind of takes off. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had this video where I talked about kind of subscriber goals or whatever, and at the time, my goal was like, 50 subscribers in a month or something. And someone did the math, and they're like, if you gained 50 subscribers for a month, it would take you like hundreds of years to reach, whatever the math, and it's exponential. It's not linear. It's not like this slow progress. It's forever. It compounds and it gets way bigger. But the slowest, most annoying part of it is that beginning part. It's literally flat for the longest time before that exponential curve starts to go up, and then it's like pretty much vertical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it sort of touches on like a healthy, nuanced SI is developing good habits. You mentioned Artist Way, accidentally, but Artist Way I think is a great thing also for INFP. It's if I'm not mistaken, like writing every day and process,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I think the idea of whatever your niche is, whatever your thing is that you're passionate about, finding a way to do it daily, even if it's just 5-20 minutes, some amount of time that you pick daily that you're going to do it every single day. Eventually, the power of habits, eventually you get used to that rhythm. Stuff flows more, like inspiration comes a lot quicker when you're in that groove of doing it consistently over time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of the concept of choose your hard. You have two choices. Both of them are going to be hard in different ways. One choice is you only do things that you like to do, and so that means abandoning your passion sometimes because you don't feel like it, and you only write when you feel like it. That path, what's hard about that path is you don't end up reaching success because you are very inconsistent. People are not going to follow you consistently with your new novel ideas because it's like there sometimes, not sometimes, and people honestly don't even know who you are. Like when you do it that way, people are not going to find you, and that might lead you to lie awake at night in regret, wondering what could have been. A lot of times the things that people regret is what they didn't do, not what they did do, and I think that's very SI third needs to learn that. Like, you don't have to be so safety conscious, take the risks, do the big thing. And then there's the other hard path, which is you wake up every day at your set time and you work on it every day. And some days that's hard because you don't feel like it, but at the end of the day you feel accomplished because you got closer. Maybe it was a crappy day's writing, maybe you don't ultimately use it, but you built a habit in yourself that you're going to be the type of person who follows their passion and does what they say they're going to do, and who lives their life well, and who puts their money where their mouth is.
Yeah. Should we wrap up INFPs?
Yeah.
We after our little roast, we like to go back and be like, "We're sorry, we love you guys."
I know, because I feel bad because, like I say, INFPs are my favorite type, and if an INFP maybe only saw this video of mine, they're like, "That's how she talks about her favorite type, really?" But this is the deal. It's like when this is a TE form of love. When you love someone so much, you want them to be better and to be their best version of themselves and to reach their potential. And I think just sitting there talking about how great people are and just keep on doing what you're doing. Keep on just being lazy, just do whatever you feel like, man. No, that's not ultimately helping the INFP or any of the types. Like, what ultimately helps them is use all the tools in your toolbox. You've got these 4 functions, and that 4th one will get you what your first one wants. And just to really tell, I want INFPs to reach their potential, because I have been impacted by so much of their stuff. I've cried because of their music. I've read their poetry, and it deeply moves me. And then I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, I want this to be out there in the public. I don't want this just to be something they save for their spouse to read and their best friend to read. I want it to be out there because it's so moving. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the biggest growth advice, I think, reading The War of Art is a great thing to do as an INFP. I think finding ways, if you're in a depressive state now, if you feel like you've been depressed the last few years even, to figure out jotting down some unhealthy patterns that you've used. So maybe there's unhealthy eating patterns, maybe there's unhealthy just habits that you've built over time. Start to pinpoint those and replace those with better habits. Mm-hmm. You've talked about, I think, in a few videos, the question, you might, I don't know how to say it. Go for it.
Oh, yeah. Garrett's in this mentoring group. And so there was a question, I think it's a introverted sensing dominant who kind of passed on this question to them. And the question was, what lesson should you have learned in the last 5 years that you didn't? And you journal on that for a page. And then the follow-up is then, how are you going to go about actually learning that lesson in the next 5 years so that it's not a problem that continues to plague you in the next 5 years? And I think from an SI dominant, it's a more nuanced, how are we processing the past so that we can go into a more optimistic future? Mm-hmm. And, making sure to not repeat the same mistakes of the past and patterns of the past, and to go forward toward a bright future with different possibilities than what the past has brought us to.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. I think that's a great question to think through as an INFP.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Awesome. Well, yeah, I love INFPs. I think they are super insightful and very creative, and I have really been touched by some INFPs. So, yeah, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.
Yeah, you guys are